A couple of days ago, I shared a video that was dedicated to all the men who say, not all men. And in that video, I said that while I appreciated the overall point that the guy was trying to make, and I really appreciated the way that he demonstrated that bell curve, because it really does capture a visual of the majority of men.
Part of the problem. And one other very important piece to this is that the distribution of men is not just a flat straight line like this, like basically everything else. It's a bell curve. So yes, it's a very small minority of men who are really, really terrible.
The problem is the fact that he kept saying only a small percentage of men were inflicting violence on women. I had an issue with that because it's false, and the data proves that it's false. I think that he might have been trying to tiptoe around these so-called good men's fragile egos, but I'm not. Walking on eggshells to ease their conscience is what got us here. So no, we're not doing that. There really are far more violent men than he admitted in his video. So the framework is kind of dishonest because it makes male violence look like an exception to the rule instead of what it really is, a centuries-old historical pattern. I did a teaching a few weeks back about the Psalm 55:21 types of men. The scripture says the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Yeah, so a lot of men have simply learned how to suppress their violent desires, and the problem is they can't hold them back that well or for that long. As you will see in the comments that I'm going to show, it always leaks out. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And you can tell by the smug tone in their comments, the subtle gaslighting, the casual digs, the attacks on my appearance. That's the leakage. That's the evidence. And just like I promised, just like I said in another video, they always come out of the woodwork to defend themselves and their ego. Side note, the attacks on my appearance, those are rooted in pretty privilege. Men invented that, which is why I refuse to participate in that conversation. I don't think that people realize how much the entire conversation of pretty privilege really centers men and the male gaze without expressly stating it. It's very subtle. And they often pick women for all of the shallowest external reasons that are rooted in pretty privilege. It's really just a projection because a shallow man can't possibly seek a woman of substance when he has no substance himself. Anyways, back to my original point. When you peel back the covers, you realize how many men stay silent about overt male violence, like the obvious violent men, because they really share some of the same lack of respect for women as the violent ones. These are the cowardly men, though. They don't want the accountability that comes with the actions, whether they be good or evil. They'll avoid both. They won't protest for righteousness, and they won't resist the temptation toward wickedness either. They'll live in this miserable, lukewarm state of discontent. Too fearful to act, but too prideful to change. Lukewarm. And that internal war starts to leak out through microaggressions and tone policing on the internet. So they punch down on women, the oppressed, because they're too cowardly to confront their real oppressor. These are the Psalm 55:21 men. Words smooth as butter, but in their heart is war. The nice guys and the so-called good men, they really do have violence inside. They're just too afraid to be found out. It's not even integrity that's keeping them in check. It's just fear of being exposed and ruining their public image. If there were really that many good men on earth, wouldn't their actions just speak for themselves? Shouldn't the presence of all these supposedly good men be so evident that women would already feel the impact of it? And children too. We'd all be benefiting from the impact of all these good men. So why do they keep showing up in the comments every time we bring up the harms that we experience from patriarchy and misogyny? Why do they feel the need to come out and run a public relations campaign for themselves? Especially if the post doesn't apply to you. What's the point of you saying anything to defend yourself? You want to know the real reason why they have to run this campaign? It's because they have abandoned their responsibility as Yahuwah's watchmen who are called to campaign against injustice, oppression, and the weightier matters of the law, according to Matthew 23:23. They've abandoned their posts as good men. They're actually the cowardly men described in Revelations 21:8. The only thing that they usually stand up for is their false public image. It's the image of the good man with no actions to back it up. So I pulled a few scriptures. Let's take a look at what a good man would actually look like in action according to scripture. So we should see them mentoring and standing in the gap, like Sirach 4 and 10 commands. Be as a father to the fatherless, and instead of a husband unto their mother. So you shouldn't be out here trying to get a woman's good and get into a woman's pants in order to take care of her kids. They should also be speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves, judging righteously, defending the poor and needy, as Proverbs 31 verses 8 to 9 instructs. We should see them doing what Jeremiah 22 and 3 says, rescuing from the hand of the oppressor, doing no violence to the fatherless or the widow. We should also see them executing true judgment, showing mercy and compassion, as Zechariah 7 verses 9 to 10 commands. We should see them defending the poor and fatherless and delivering the needy out of the hand of the wicked, like Psalm 82 verses 3 to 4. We should hear them bearing one another's burdens and so fulfilling the law of Christ, as Galatians 6 and 2 teaches. We should see them living out 1 John 3, 17 to 18, loving not in word or tongue, but in deed and in truth. We should see them keeping pure religion, as James 1:27 says, which means to visit the orphaned and the widowed in their affliction and keep themselves unspotted from the world. If these men were truly good by biblical definition, we would know them by their fruit. Simple as that. We would see their advocacy. We would see them out here crying aloud and sparing not, standing up for the oppressed, the poor, the dispossessed, the widowed, and the orphaned. But Ezekiel 22, 29 to 30, he already prophesied, the people of the land have used oppression and exercised robbery and have vexed the poor and needy. And I sought for a man among them who should build the wall and stand in the gap for me being Yahuwah, but I found none. If they really were good men, they would simply align with the truth. They would validate when women come out here and share our testimonies and our experiences, because they would know with a clear conscience that it doesn't apply to them. But that's not what happens, is it? Instead, what they do is jump into women's comments with these same old tired lines, trying to protect their image instead of trying to actually protect women. Instead of aligning with the truth, they try to suppress it by invalidating women's experiences in the comments and discrediting those of us who speak up. Just emotional abuse, very covert, subtle emotional abuse. Every time we talk about harm, here they come. Not all men. The funny thing is, if I were to make the same video about white people, these same good men would be co-signing and cheering me on in the comments. They would agree and validate, and they would probably even share their own stories. But the moment that the accountability shifts to them, it shifts from racism to sexism. Suddenly, these black men, they need nuance and they want to cherry pick what I say and tone police what I say. And suddenly they're offended and cannot resist insulting me in the comments. That's how you know their conscience is not clear. Because when the truth fits, they wear it. And another thing I think is really funny is how quickly men assume that I'm hurt. And they say that as if it's supposed to be an insult. As if being hurt means that I somehow lack credibility now. If anything, it makes me more credible because it demonstrates that I'm using both sides of my brain. My logical reasoning side, along with the emotional attunement creativity side. Both together form what we therapists like to call the wise mind. It's a part of DBT therapy. Men love to brag about being rational, but all they're really doing is confessing that they operate out of half of their brain. They suppress the limbic system, like the emotional center that connects us to empathy and discernment and compassion, all tools that are very necessary to be a leader, by the way. And men will over-identify with the prefrontal cortex, the part that handles logic, calculation, and control. True wisdom requires you to use both sides of your brain. When you integrate emotional awareness with executive functioning, that's when you make emotionally intelligent, spiritually grounded, and mature decisions. So me using my entire brain, including the part that processes emotion, means that I'm engaging both systems, not shutting half of myself off just to look powerful. The men who pride themselves on not tapping into their emotions, are really just openly admitting that they lack emotional intelligence. They're not using wisdom or their full reasoning skills. Thinking that you only use half your brain is a flex is quite tragic, actually. Every prophet in scripture expressed hurt, disappointment, anger, and grief. Like they literally expressed the full range of human emotion all throughout scripture. King David poured it all out in the Psalms, like that whole book right in the middle of the Bible. Jeremiah wrote an entire book called Lamentations. So that sounds like a whole lot of hurt to me. Ezekiel despaired, and Yahusha, listen, he flipped tables and he wept and everything. So the list goes on. So being hurt does not disqualify anybody from telling the truth. It doesn't disqualify me from being a mouthpiece for Yahuwah. It simply means that I can feel deeply and still maturely and honestly communicate what I feel. It's part of emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. And instead of hating on my skills, which you lack, I think a lot of these men need to try learning and modeling what they see in me. Although this video actually focuses on the men with violence in their hearts, I do want to give an honorable mention to all the men who sit beside the violent men in that bell curve. They're not outwardly abusive, but they're silent just the same. Even if they don't speak harm, they don't speak up against it either. Their avoidance is still cowardice. Think about Barak in Judges chapter 4. He refused to go into battle unless Deborah went with him. And because of that, the glory of the victory went to a woman. He left a legacy of hesitating to do what Yah called him to do. So what legacy are these self-proclaimed good men really leaving behind? Because a good tree brings forth good fruit. If there really are that many good men in this patriarchal society, then why is that kind of fruit so hard to find? Why is there a shortage of male mentors in every mentorship program nationwide? Why are so many women saying that they'd rather take their chances with a bear than a man? Why do so many women have stories of sexual coercion, exploitation, and assault? Why do so many children have testimonies of either absent fathers or fathers who were physically present but still emotionally checked out and really didn't add much to their lives? And why are there so many sitcoms that show women as the real leaders of the household who kind of keep everything together and always talk sense into the man while making jokes out of the husband's weaponized incompetence? Why do we only find the good men with good fruit in these obscure little corners of the earth? If there really were that many good men producing good fruit, then we'd see what we see in those scriptures, and their fruit would testify much louder than these tired old recycled comments ever could.